finally another Blue Jackets game day. Can they pull out the win? Who knows? But they are facing an old friend in John Tortorella. So we're going to talk all about that. And we've got Rachel Donner of Locked On Flyers here to preview the matchup with us. That's all coming up today on Locked On Blue Jackets.
Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to bring you news, stories, trials, tribulations, excitement, yelling, all of the above, and more about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day, every day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and also over on YouTube. So if you haven't subscribed over there, then feel free to do so. You win, I win. You get notified every time episodes go live. And we love a win-win situation here at Locked On Blue Jackets. Today, it's another Squadcast day. The Blue Jackets play their first game in like 5 days. And so I thought we would check in on how the Flyers are doing, because the Flyers were supposed to be pretty bad this season, and so far they are exceeding expectations while the Blue Jackets continue to struggle. So I wanted to talk to Rachel Donner all about that and all about what makes the Flyers so successful, and most importantly, is it sustainable? So we'll talk about all of that in just a minute. So I'll just let the conversation roll. So when I thought about doing a squadcast with the people over at Locked On Flyers, I did not think that we would be having the conversation that we're going to have, because I think I and also literally everyone else kind of assumed that the Flyers and the Blue Jackets would be in the opposite position that they are currently in. And the Flyers are, for better or worse, succeeding at the minute. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that might be happening. We're going to catch up with John Tortorella for his sins, but I thought, let's do a squadcast. And so we got Rachel Donner of Locked On Flyers here to explain why the Flyers are doing what they're doing, because I'm confused, and I suspect many other people are also confused about the Flyers. So I guess let's start there. What the heck is up with the Flyers?
Well, Carter Hart is up with the Flyers. Let's be real here. I think that is the primary factor going into this. He is making incredible saves. He is cool, calm, and collected in net, and is undefeated in regulation. There's a couple of overtime losses there, but yeah, I think that if you want the biggest reason, it's Carter Hart. We did finally get Felix Sandstrom his first NHL win versus the St. Louis Blues, who are a whole other mess that Locked On Blues can talk about. But I think that that was a good thing for him coming in, because Carter Hart was sick. But yeah, that's the main reason. Now, there are John Tortorella reasons as well, I think, to some degree, as much as you probably don't want to hear about them or you know about them as well. And I think that what he has done so far is exactly what you expect of him. He drives really hard physical play in his players. He demands excellence. He's going to bench people who aren't performing according to what he wants. He has benched Kevin Hayes and Travis Konechny for an entire period of a game that I think went over okay with those two, because they got right back in it and have actually played quite well. I'm very pleased with what Kevin Hayes has done so far. But I think, Tortorella is doing what Tortorella does, and demanded that kind of style of hockey. So they're blocking a ton of shots. The average is, I think, above 25 a game for the Flyers right now, which, yeah, I know, right?
That sounds super familiar. Like everything
Right.
you're saying, I'm like, yep, check.
And again, Carter Hart is being, tested pretty mightily. And I think that intermittently they're getting some good play, and that's what's putting them over the top in some games. Again, the game against St. Louis, they scored 5 goals, and that was pretty phenomenal relative to their lower goal count. Their underlying numbers are pretty bad still, and they should not have won several of the games they did. But here we are with them, being, I think, 7-3-2 as of recording.
Sometimes a goalie just decides that he's gonna win. Like those were actually the two things that I had kind of picked up on. Was I was looking at stats for like doing a little preview of how the Flyers were doing, and I was like, you mean to tell me that Carter Hart is 6-0-2 and has like a 947 save percentage? Like,
Which is
I love
totally
Carter Hart. I'm really
sustainable.
happy that. Oh, it's completely sustainable. This seems fine. But I've been a huge Carter Hart fan for a while now. I'm happy that he seems to have figured out after, I think a disappointing couple of seasons. But maybe he's gotten out of the shadow of Martin Jones and has figured out that he can be a good goalie again. And the other thing as well is obviously John Tortorella. Like, I am much higher on John Tortorella than I think a lot of Blue Jacket people and general hockey people. But everything you're saying, I'm like, yeah, like John Tortorella is a coach that demands a lot from his players, and he's a coach that makes a team into more than the sum of their parts. Like, that was the big thing for me with Columbus, was the roster that he succeeded with was not a good roster. And so it's kind of it. I'm not saying that the Flyers is a bad roster by any shape of the imagination. I am saying that they're paying Rasmus Ristolainen $5 million, but
he got
felt
benched
like
too.
a roster that was, yeah, I'm unsurprised. There was a really interesting Tortorella quote actually that I want to ask you about in terms of Rasmus Ristolainen in just a minute, but he's doing with the Flyers what he did with Columbus in 2016. He's coming in. This is Flyers roster is a roster that I think is primed for success with specifically John Tortorella's style of coaching. Again, is it sustainable? Who knows? But the Blue Jackets enjoyed 4 very good years under John Tortorella before the 5th year kind of went extremely badly. So, hey, maybe this is just who the Flyers are from now on. But I do want to kind of continue the Tortorella thought process. I saw a really interesting quote from him about Rasmus Ristolainen and about the things that he demands of his players. And I was like, man, Torts is going to love Rasmus Ristolainen because he's a stay-at-home defenseman and he throws the body around. And I was like, yep, everything seems to be what you would expect from a John Tortorella player. But like you say, he got benched. He's talking about how he expects more from him. Has that surprised you in terms of what he's asking from certain players?
I think with Risto, the situation is that Risto is used to playing a certain kind of physical game here, and it's different than what Torts wants, because when Risto throws a hit, he throws a hit hard and then is delayed in his reaction to what to do next. And so when he gets the puck off somebody like that, but doesn't turn around and retrieve the puck, that's where the problem lies. And so what Tortorella wants from him is to be more selective about when he throws those hits and to really focus on his defensive positioning, because he is way out of position when he does that. And so that's been the problem, and that's why he was benched for a game. And I think that with Risto, it's going to be a challenge for him to play the way that Torts wants him to, and it's going to take some time. So we're trying to give him a little leeway here, but also Risto has a ceiling, and we know that. So will he get to at least a baseline level that Torts likes? Time will tell.
For sure. I want to talk about one more Flyer, very familiar to Blue Jackets fans. Big Tortorella guy, Cam Atkinson, he had a really good season for the Flyers last year, I think. Has he continued that kind of play? Is he kind of flourishing under Tortorella? How's Cam doing this season? Because we miss him in Columbus.
Well, we miss him in Philadelphia too, because he's been injured the entire
Oh,
season and
no.
has not played. And yeah, it's been between him and Sean Couturier being out, it's been very difficult, because those are 2 guys that we really expected to come back this year and be big contributors, especially Coots, but Cam to some degree too, because again, with the familiarity of the system, and he was going to be that bridge from the Flyers to this team and towards his style. But we don't know when Cam Atkinson is going to return to the lineup, and it's a big missing piece, and it's causing the Flyers to have to play some guys who shouldn't be up in the second line on the second line.
Yeah. Okay, in that case, let's talk about some other players who have impressed you. Obviously, with Couturier being out and Atkinson being out, guys have had to step up. We've talked about Carter Hart stepping up massively from last season. Who of the skaters has kind of maybe surprised you? Who's really kind of stepped up and has taken advantage of maybe increased ice time or a new coach? Who's your early season MVP that is not named Carter Hart?
I mean, Travis Konechny is kind of back to old form, you would say. I think he's thriving under Torts, which is a good thing, and I think that's a little bit surprising, given that, he is a very emotional player,
Mm.
and so I think some of us weren't sure whether that would fit or not, and, so far he's leading the team in points right now, and it's a really good sign, and he's getting a lot more shots than he was last year, so that is a really good sign. I would say kind of the 1B 2 guys for me are Ivan Provorov is playing very, very well. There were some questions last season, and I think positionally he's better, defensively he's better, and he's stepping up in the play a little bit more, and he's really contributing a lot, and I think that he feels really good in this system. The 1B is Scott Lawton, who's just he is playing in all situations and getting a ton of minutes per game, for a forward who ostensibly is maybe a second, third liner. He's getting approximately 20 minutes a game, which is a lot. And again, playing in all situations, he's blocking shots, he's stepping up offensively, he's leading plays. And that's why, although the Flyers don't have a captain, Lawton right now is wearing an A, and he's the only one.
Oh, interesting. That'll be something to keep an eye on, I think. In a minute, we're going to flip the script. Rachel's going to ask me some questions about the Blue Jackets, who, boy, do I have some feelings to share about the Blue Jackets as of right now. But before we do that, I want to talk about BetOnline because it's where the game starts. You can follow sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. It's your number one source for odds and trends. Every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball, soccer, esports, they've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, which you're listening to Locked on Blue Jackets or Locked on Flyers, we're going to assume that you like sports podcasts. You can find them at BetOnline as well. We are the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. So if you want to put some money on who's going to win tonight's game, who's going to score a goal, we're going to talk all about who we think might score a goal later on. So if you want to put some money on our predictions, then you can do that at betonline.net. Head to the website today, use your laptop or your mobile device to learn more, because BetOnline is where the game starts.
So, talking to you, Jay, before the season on the Locked On Flyers season preview, we went through all of our divisional rivals, and you were pretty optimistic about the season. You were ecstatic about the signing of Johnny Gaudreau, as much as we were sad about it. And I'm wondering, what happened here, or what is happening here. It's still early going. I think there's room for a turnaround. I don't want to write off the entire season, but Columbus is in the basement of the Metro division right now. And, what do you think your biggest problem is?
God, where do I start with this, with the problems that this team has? In fairness, I do think that the team is not as bad as the record states. They've had some bad luck. They've had some injury issues. They lost Patrick Laine for most. He's played, I think, 3 or 4 games so far this season, maybe 5. We lost him to an elbow injury. The biggest problem, I think, and as much as it hurts me to say it, I think goaltending is a massive issue for this team right now. all three goalies have a sub 900 save percentage. Korpisalo came in, played, I thought, pretty well for his season debut. That was his first game since March, when he had, season-ending hip surgery. Tarasov, who was backing up, has been fine for a rookie goalie. Honestly, Elvis is the biggest worry right now for me. He hasn't been playing like Elvis. Granted, the defense in front of him has been very poor. And if you look at kind of his underlying stats, he is allowing a lot of high danger goals, not a lot of low danger goals. His low danger save percentage, I think last time I checked anyway, was above average. So, the defense is definitely not helping him out. But when you're allowing, 4, 5, 6, 7 goals a game, there are very few teams that have the offense to overcome allowing 7 goals a game. It's maybe Edmonton, maybe Florida. That's it. And so I think that's what's really killing them at the minute is the goaltending. I have very few problems with the offense as a whole. I've been really, we talked about Johnny Gaudreau. I have no issues with Johnny Gaudreau's play so far. Has he scored as many points as people wanted him to? Maybe not, but he's playing the right way. For the most part, I have no issue with the forwards. It is the defense and the goaltending that I think is really killing this team right now.
Right. I'm wondering how you're feeling about David Jiricek so far.
I love him. He's played. I think he's only got into a couple of games. He got called up. The Blue Jackets have had some real tough injury news in terms of their defenseman on the right side. Adam Boquist went down with a broken foot. Before that, Nick Blankenburg went down with an injury. He's been a real bright spot of this season. And so, I was like, man, it sucks that we could have a right defensive side of Boquist, Blankenburg, and Jiricek, and instead we're just kind of rotating between these three guys. But Jiricek specifically has really impressed me. I thought he didn't play a ton, but I thought when he did play, he played with composure. I thought he made really smart plays. He's not the strongest skater in the world, and I think that's really evident at an NHL level. But you can see flashes of the defenseman that he's going to be when he's, not 18 years old and in his first, I think he's played 3 games so far, so is he the world-changing defenseman that I think a lot of people thought that he could be for the Blue Jackets? No, but there's a lot of potential there, and it's really exciting to see him play in the NHL. And he's been really good for the Monsters as well. He had, I believe, at the time of call-up, I think he had 4 points in 5 games with the Monsters. So, he's doing the right things, and he's hopefully going to keep developing. But I'm super excited about David Jiricek.
Yeah, I was going to say, I actually got to see 2 of his games for the Monsters because they were playing the Phantoms at the time. And I was pretty impressed with his play. I think at the AHL level, he really has a handle on things. I think, he does have to make some adjustments, like you said, with his skating. But I thought he had 2 solid games against the Phantoms. I don't know how much that's saying, but
Yeah,
I think
yeah, he feels very much like a player that's just at the cusp of being too good for the AHL, but is not necessarily NHL ready. So I think I'm happy for him to be in the AHL for the bulk of this season, especially if the Blue Jackets are going to continue to lose games. I'm very much of the opinion that keep him in the AHL, keep Kirill Marchenko in the AHL. Let them develop that, let them play 1 million minutes a night, then dragging them up to a bad Blue Jackets team to get their confidence wrecked.
So one of the things that I think the Flyers have to work on in order to create some dynamic plays like they were able to against St. Louis is win more faceoffs. How are the Blue Jackets doing on faceoffs this year?
The Blue Jackets are doing suspiciously well in faceoffs. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think they're like 17th in the league, which is honestly a victory. The Blue Jackets' big thing the past few seasons has been they cannot win a face-off to save their life. And I think it's gone a little bit downhill the past couple of games, but for the most part, the Blue Jackets have been out face-offing the other team, which again continues to be a surprise. Boone Jenner was leading the league in face-off percentage for a little while there, which again is unusual because He, I think, has struggled with faceoffs at times, but he's doing really well. And if only they could do something with all of these faceoff wins that they're getting. I think Jenna's definitely carrying the team, but I think we've seen flashes of really strong face-offs from both Stillinger and Sean Corrali, especially. Rostovic's struggling, but for the most part, I have very few complaints with the Blue Jackets in terms of face-offs, which, I mean, it's a very small part of the game, but you take the wins where you can get them, especially if you're on a 5-game losing streak.
Exactly. Yeah, I think, the Flyers were a little worried just because this will be 2 desperate teams in a row that we're playing going from St. Louis to playing Columbus in terms of trying to break a losing streak here. And at least, for Columbus, they'll be at home. But I think what I'm looking at is how the Flyers win this one. And to me, it's disrupting the transition game because I think that the Flyers sometimes struggle with preventing zone entries and getting out of their own defensive zone sometimes. And I think that's where, other than a Johnny Gaudreau, or a Patrick Laine if he's in the game, there aren't a ton of super fast guys on Columbus right now. And so they should be able to intercept. They should be able to get sticks in there. But what's your take on that in terms of playing defensively against Columbus?
I mean, I do want to. I pulled up the face-off percentages just before we move on. Columbus is currently sitting 18th in the league at 50.3%, which, again, if they're breaking even in face-offs, I'll take that because they've been just awful for the past couple of seasons. But in terms of defensive play, I saw a really great tweet about their defensive play from Aaron Portzline, who talked to a former NHL defender and asked how he thought the Blue Jackets were doing defensively. And he said infrequent is the best word to describe the Blue Jackets defense right now. So honestly, I think it's not really a case of being defensively solid against the Blue Jackets. The offense is what it is. I think if you can get that Laine Gaudreau pairing rolling, I think that's really dangerous. But honestly, I think the Flyers could outscore the Blue Jackets with ease. Not even on the strength of their offense. I think it's very much a case of the Blue Jackets just can't seem to win a battle in their own zone. So if the Flyers are willing to, throw everything into outscoring the team, Carter Hart is clearly doing fine by himself. He's, for for better or worse, he seems to be holding the net, regardless of how good the defense is in front of him. So I do genuinely think, and this is maybe not the most helpful answer, but honestly, I think the Flyers could do a lot worse than just decide that they're going to outscore the Blue Jackets.
Yeah, I'm hoping they can continue the momentum from the previous game in terms of really, showing that they have some skill and can make good passes and things like that. And Columbus could be a good team to do it against.
Yeah. This feels, I don't know, this is a weird game. I don't want to say must win because I hate the concept of must win games, but you just had if you're Columbus, you just flew all the way to Tampa to get your butts handed to you by the Colorado Avalanche back to back. You're mad, you're frustrated, you've just spent a long and awkward plane ride home. You haven't played in 4 days. Like, this feels like if the Blue Jackets are going to make a statement here, this feels like a game where you're going to find out what the Blue Jackets are. Are they a good team that's been unlucky, or are they a team that's just going to fold? And I can't decide which way this game is going to go. Normally, I like to make predictions, final score, who's going to open the scoring, things like that. This, I think, is the first game this season where, it genuinely wouldn't shock me if the Blue Jackets were if the Blue Jackets won 7-2, and it also wouldn't surprise me if they lost 7-2.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I think it should be a real exciting one. I am looking forward to it. And again, I think it's similar for the Flyers. Is this team actually making progress or not? And there's some big questions to be answered in this game. So I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yes, it should be a good game. I always enjoy watching these two teams play. I don't feel like it's as much of a rivalry as either team with Pittsburgh or Columbus and Washington. They tried to have a rivalry for a bit. I don't feel like there's the rivalry aspect there, but it does always feel like there's going to be fireworks when these two teams meet, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see John Tortorella versus Brad Larson, because it's very much the student versus the master. So we'll see how it goes. I'm excited to watch a Tortorella coach team again. I sometimes his coaching style is I don't want to say boring, but he is, he's very much a defensive coach. Lots of shot blocking, like you said, lots of physical play, but I know it's always fun to watch a Tortorella coach team, in my opinion. So I'm excited to get back to it. For, like I said, I keep saying for better or worse. It's going to be for worse. I'm trying not to get my hopes up. But
Oh, come on.
I will finish off by saying that the Blue Jackets currently have a shorter active losing streak than the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I feel like we can both appreciate that.
We absolutely can come together in the spirit of pettiness against the
Yes, I love
Pittsburgh
to be petty.
Penguins.
For people who, before we finish off, people who maybe want to keep up with how Tortorella is doing, or how a Tortorella coach team is doing, or they want to keep up with Cam Atkinson, clearly I need to keep up with Cam Atkinson more. Where can people find you and your show?
Locked On Flyers is on Twitter at Locked On Flyers. Of course, we're available wherever you get your podcasts, over on YouTube. As it says underneath me, I'm on Twitter for as long as Twitter exists. I'm at R Miriam, and I will continue to be there as long as Twitter is.
And that's going to be everything for today's episode. Tomorrow, we will do a recap of tonight's episode. Hopefully, we'll be recapping a win. Thank you for listening to Locked On Blue Jackets. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jake Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find this podcast at LO_Blue Jackets. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day every day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and also over on YouTube. Now go and make your second listen of the day Locked On Sports Today. They've got biggest stories of the day. They've got instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. First listen of the day, Locked On Blue Jackets. Second listen of the day, Locked On Sports Today. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.